A new sex education project at the Imperial College Healthcare Trust is encouraging schools to take pupils on tours of their sexual health clinics. The teenagers will be invited to examine sexually transmitted infections such as gonorrhea under a microscope. Diana Baxter, a project manager of the charity GFS platform, says we want them to see the reality of what happens, to see the treatment rooms and some fairly graphic photos. It's a bit of a shock tactic. However, critics say the tours are normalising promiscuity, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that will further contribute to the rise in sexually transmitted diseases. So, do we think this will work? Do you think shocking youngsters is the way to get them to practice safe sex?
Well, I mean, I know it sounds quite a strong thing to do, isn't it? But I actually do. Because, I mean, if I go back to my time, I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about diseases. I only know what kids told me in the playgrounds. I didn't know what things were called. And even if they just said it, you know, like, I think it used to be called STD, I thought that was a telephone call. Do you know what I mean? So I knew nothing. I didn't know anything about anything. And so I think somebody like me, it would have been a good idea, because I would have been told what they were and what it meant. But I had no idea. I didn't know you could catch things. I didn't know anything about condoms, even. I didn't even know what they were. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I had no interest, so I only knew what kids were telling me. And in those days, you didn't go and talk to anybody about it. You just listened to the kids. These days, they're much more clued up, and they know much more, and I think they should. It should be much more open and out there, so they know what they can get.
Well, I'm kind of... I half agree with you, because I think the difference is, nowadays, they're not actually scared of any of it. Whereas when I was at school, because we didn't talk about it, I mean, at my school we didn't even do sex education, and it was something that you just couldn't talk about with your parents then, you know, you just didn't talk about sex or anything. So I had just this inbuilt fear of it, so it put me off ever wanting to do any of it, you know, when I was that young, because I thought, oh no, it's all very scary, and you do hear scare stories from your friends, so you think, oh, I don't want to do that, you know. So in some respects, I think that worked better for me. And the problem with things like...
Polly, the kids that are doing it, shouldn't they know what they can get?
But they do. That's the whole point.
But
the
some
kids
don't know, do they?
Most of them do. I mean, if they're in schools nowadays, there's a great sex education section in most high schools. I mean, my boys used to come home, you know, they'd have sex education at school and they'd come home with all the leaflets about diseases and contraception and pregnancy, all of that. They were so well informed. I think the problem is, and I can only relate this as well because I'm a smoker, and there is now those shocking pictures on cigarette packets, which are horrifying. I mean, they couldn't be more graphic. But I still go out and smoke because the problem is we're a society that kind of goes, yeah, but it won't happen to me, you know, until it does. And I think that's what kids do. They go, oh, that's awful, but that won't happen to me.
And especially if you're a teenager, because you think you're invincible, and you know you'll get shown these absolutely horrible pictures of what can happen to you. Have a good little titter about it, you know, with all your friends, and then forget because you won't think it'll happen to you. What about you, Zoe? What do you think?
No, I remember a little bit of sex education at school, but nothing about STIs and diseases, nothing at all. And I think it probably would have been a good idea, especially for me and where I went to school. You know, I had lots of sexual partners when I was younger, and I was lucky, and you know, I never caught anything. But there were a lot of pregnancies around in my class and in my school, and so I think, you know, we were never shocked into anything, and I think sometimes the shock tactic is a good idea. And I think, you know, we need to see there's all sorts of things out there. You want to protect your kids.
I think kids are still quite naive, a lot of them. I know what you're saying, but I think there are kids that are naive, like I was. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and there was a building, and I know people used to go in it and come out of it, and my mother used to say, never go near that building. And I never did. I used to cross the road, but I didn't know what the building was for.
Was it?
Well, it was obviously a clinic where people went, and I didn't know what it was. Well, how naive and stupid was that? You see, so
but you never ended up there.
No, I didn't.
OK, if you want some help or some information on this subject, go to our website. After the break, we'll be